And hello, everybody. Welcome to Narrative on a Tuesday evening, a breaking news Tuesday evening. It's good to be with you tonight as we prepare for the first phase in Stephen Bannon's declaration, or whatever it will be, that he's in contempt of Congress. Hi, Heidi Kuda. How are you? Oh, I can't hear you. Why can't I hear you? You're muted, probably. There you
I
are.
am muted. Yeah, I am unmuted
And you're
now.
unmuted right now. We are just rolling into the show like as we always do, with a lot of thunder, because we were trying to set up the live feed and try and talk to our amazing guests tonight, who will join us in just a few minutes. Rachel Bitterkoffer, who's a fantastic strategist, like one of the best strategists in the world. And the reason we invited her on tonight is because she's been the anti-red wave architect, and Stephen Bannon is sort of the red wave architect. So we thought we'd bring the anti-red wave architect here, and she'll be joining us in just a few minutes to give us her analysis. And later on, the very amazing Andrew Laufer, who you all know from Twitter, the civil rights attorney, will be joining us to give us analysis from 7:30 as the vote starts getting underway at the January 6th committee. He'll be giving us a blow-by-blow analysis. He's had a lot to say about this whole process and whether the committee is doing the right thing and the right, in the right processes in terms of finding Bannon in contempt. And so we'll get to all of that in just a bit. And tonight's show is Bannon, wall to wall, because there's no better villain than Stephen Bannon in the story of Trump Russia when you really think about it. I mean, he's an understated villain. He's not the guy you'd actually expect to do very much. But I think behind the scenes, Stephen Bannon has pulled a lot of strings in the last few years, and certainly around January 6th. And we'll be unpacking some of his network, some of the people he may work with, or he does work with, some of the people he may work for, including perhaps China, and maybe Russia, maybe other countries around the world. So we'll get to that a little later on after we get to the starting block. Heidi, you'll be checking in on people's messages, and hopefully they'll be
I am.
making sure we don't make any mistakes along the way.
They're already being smartasses, Zev. They're like, what's the news today? There's no news.
I don't think there is any news, but you know what we do have? We do have the starting block. Just imagine I have three faces on here, but I don't have three faces on here. You have two. The three faces I would be showing you if they were here would be Oleg Deripaska would be the first one. Who's the second?
Christopher Steele, the spy who came in from the cold.
And the third one? Colin Powell.
Colin Powell, yes.
All right. So let's start with the big news of the day, which is Oleg Deripaska getting his homes raided both in New York and in Washington, D.C. We're not quite sure why, although I would hazard a guess that it has something to do with 2016. You know, not only is Oleg Deripaska one of the biggest central figures in everything that happened with Trump Russia in 2016, he's also tied to a couple of other scandals which have followed from 2016, which include all sorts of corruption in our political circles. And, you know, Oleg Deripaska is pretty prone to this. It's not the first time he's found himself maybe buying off a politician or two. He's done it in the UK for his master, Vladimir Putin. There's no reason why he wouldn't do the same thing here in the United States. Any
That's
thoughts on
right.
that?
Apparently, it's apparently related to U.S. sanctions. And when you look at the things that he was sanctioned for, he's not super nice. Racketeering and money laundering, possibly trying to kill somebody. Yeah.
Well, it's interesting. If it is about the U.S. sanctions, then it has a lot to do with maybe Mitch McConnell's, sudden discovery of an aluminium plant in Kentucky, because that's what Deripaska gave him in exchange for the dropping of sanctions. It'll be really interesting to see where this unfolds. It does seem to be involving some sort of buying of a politician. So we'll keep an eye on that, and we'll keep you informed as that story develops. There's a great story on Narativ.org about Deripaska from 2019. If you want to learn about him, it's one of my favorites from Narativ.org. So check that out. Just search Deripaska. Also in the news today, and it's not unrelated, is Christopher Steele finally breaking his silence.
That's right. He told George Stephanopoulos that he stands by everything that was in the dossier. He believes Trump is still a threat. He believes that Russia is still targeting our country. And he also believes that there's a possibility that the compromat tape on Trump does actually exist.
Yes. I wonder who has it. I wonder if Stephen Bannon has it. Some people speculate that he might. It's really interesting that Christopher Steele comes out and does this interview with George Stephanopoulos just a day before the Deripaska raids, because they aren't disconnected at all. There is a lot of credence to the evidence that Steele actually worked for Deripaska for a period of time when he was trying to get his visa, Deripaska's visa, approved to come to the United States, and it was in negotiation with the FBI. It was Christopher Steele who negotiated on his behalf. So he certainly knows who Oleg Deripaska is, and he certainly knows what his intentions are. It's interesting that these two things just followed day after each other. I mean, it could be coincidence, but we know that doesn't happen anymore in the real world.
Yeah. And one thing we do know that Bannon is a leaker.
Yeah. Oh, he's a leaker. Very good. Very good. Actually, that's the best joke I've heard about P-tape in a long time. So thank you very much. Well done. You made my day, and I needed that joke. And finally, we said goodbye to Colin Powell. What a great man. What a truly great man. And anyone else out there who's saying that, has questions still about what that man did in the Iraq War, sure, there's a lot to question about what happened back then. But yeah, I think in the years since then, he's made up for all of that and then some, and shown us what real leadership is all about. He'll be missed. But however, there was a last interview that he had something to say about Donald Trump. Tell us about this.
Yes, we don't grade people on an average, and this man is really an incredible man. Broke so many barriers, but the one gift that Colin Powell gave us that I think is really quite beautiful is his final interview with Bob Woodward. He basically said that Trump was on his way to the Capitol to overturn, the election and to threaten our government, and so that is on the record from Colin Powell, and we thank him for that.
Yes, and that ties in with the big news of the day. And Colin Powell will be missed as a great general and a great Secretary of State, but also someone that we'll keep in our minds as we think about what leadership looks like in the future United States. So let's move to the big story of the day. Let's get into Mr. Steve Bannon and what's going on in the January 6th committee. That's where right now they are beginning to assemble. I see empty chairs right now, but there will be filled chairs by the time we get to the 7:30. And this January 6th committee is going to determine whether they are going to find Mr. Bannon in contempt. Then it goes from there. It doesn't quite end there. Tonight they have the vote on holding Bannon in contempt. That's just the committee. Once the committee decides, then they could go to the full house. That'll be in a matter of days. Could be a little less, but it'll be probably in a few days. There'll be a full house vote on whether they find him in contempt. Then it goes to the Department of Justice, where it will be investigated, and maybe they'll have charges. Maybe they won't. They're not under no obligation to charge Bannon, although it certainly, if it comes as a recommendation from the committee, then it certainly looks likely that they will do something, or at least impanel a grand jury. So on that note, let me welcome Rachel Bitterkoffer to the show. I've been looking forward to having you on the show for so long, and it's finally nice to finally meet you. Hi, Rachel. How are you?
Well, we did have that exciting near miss.
Yes. Well, it's great you're here, and I can see you, so that's amazing. Rachel, what's your take on what's going on today? I mean, why don't you tell people who you are first? Tell everyone about how amazing you are as a strategist.
I like to go in 007 though.
I'll play Moneypenny.
I'm a recovering academic,
Oh, one of those. We know those.
I made the career-killing mistake of telling the truth without tenure, So, and now I am I actually spent a brief tenure too as an election analyst type, but I am now using all of my professorial and analytical skills to try to help Democrats improve electioneering. It's a lot focused on messaging, taking us away from old school mobilization, persuasion, dichotomy. It's a false dichotomy, and moving into a GOP style brand centered, warfare style electioneering system. So it's quite an exciting time to be me. I do, it is true that Steve Bannon's trying to bring a red wave that I'm trying to stop, but I think that's kind of the more sporty way to put it. Bannon is trying to bring a global decline of democracy, and at least here in America, partially me and other committed people are trying to stop it. So I think that's really the important way to frame what's happening between Bannon and I, and why I'm excited to talk about the the pig pen of the fascist movement.
Oh, Zev, I can't hear you. You're muted right now.
There you go. There you go. Hi, I'm there. I've been talking all along, but enjoying your conversation nevertheless. So why are the Democrats so bad at this? I mean, it's not even a secret. It's like everybody knows. They just can't seem to message, even when they have an upper hand, like it seems they've had in the last couple of years. What's going on? Are they just too well-meaning or too conciliatory, or don't they have a fight in them? What's going on with the Democrats?
It's really important to understand actually that it is that. I mean, it is that because like so much so like what has happened to the Republican Party now is flowing bottom up in a lot of ways. But
Mm-hmm.
prior to that, it was it was programmed in top down, right? And it tapped into elements of conservatism and that worldview on the right side of the aisle, authoritarian, kind of strict parent model stuff. And it tapped into things that were like latent and predisposed to those kind of personalities. With us, because we are more nuanced, intellectual thinkers who like to see the good in people, where we all hear John Lennon's Imagine and we cry, right?
I
Like,
do all the time. You pegged
it's
me
our
right.
very so it's our very like innateness to idealism that hurts us so
Right.
profoundly in terms of electioneering, because in order to electioneer effectively in the electorate that the Republican media ecosystem writ large, and that really is a double whammy between what they do in media and what they do in their electioneering space. Like, in order for us to combat that, we have to accept some hard truths about the American voter. They aren't policy motivated unless it's delivered to them in an emotive, fearful, over the top rhetorical way. They aren't well read in terms of current events. They don't understand how the government functions. So they're very imagistic and therefore very malleable and marketable via fear and negative emotions. So, those are hard pills to swallow. A lot of our research, we spend a shit ton on R&D, but a lot of it is about confirmation bias. So if you're not asking the right research questions, you can get data all day to support your preconceived notions. So
I get they're not into policy. I get that. Who's into policy? Nobody. But the fact that they're into authoritarianism is really surprising. I mean, that seems to be like a real jump for any American to go down that route. And yet there they are, like eagerly awaiting an authoritarian state and eagerly awaiting a white nationalist state. I mean, I don't get it. I mean, it just doesn't seem like what either we were sold the wrong bill of goods about what America was in the first place, or they've been sold a bill of goods. Which one is it? Number one or number two?
Stuart Stevens, who ran 5 Republican presidential campaigns, would tell you winner, winner, chicken dinner on that, buddy, because, and his book, which I suggest everyone read, It's All a Lie, because this is a man that came to terms. Like, it's not like the Republican Party was this thing and then it became something else, okay? It was always a lie. And so the reason that now authoritarianism and nationalism has hit this like early Italy, early fascist Italy, early fascist Germany, like scene, is because of our one of our key value has been white supremacy, and not just white supremacy, but white male dominance. And now we are moving, not just in America, but in this is every good democracy shares that same thing. We're moving into a post like white dominance, white male dominance world. And I call it like the egalitarian.
Yes.
Kids, even professors get stuck, right?
Yeah,
egalitarian era, right?
Yeah.
And like, so like why? So when you ask like why are we seeing democracy challenged in many places, not just here, and why is Bannon's effort global and not just here? It's because like this white hegemony, which has been in place, I mean, people think forever, but actually the truth is white European dominance is kind of the 1400s on, or the 1200s on, right? But it's a long time structural thing that's being challenged now for the first time. And it's one thing to say, hey, we're gonna end segregation, make equality between men and women and racial minorities, but now we're 50 years in, so that that equality is actually getting implemented. That power dominance is actually being challenged in meaningful ways, and that's what and it's so makes the population very susceptible to what Bannon is designing intentionally and delivering, and he's got many allies and partners in that. He's certainly not alone, but yeah, we should
I mean,
talk
it's so
about
fascinating to me that he's, this whole, like, let's talk about this, the attack on the school boards. This is this campaign to go to school boards. I mean, it seems like like terrorism. It just seems like terrorism. It feels like they're going after these nice parents in their nice schools and attacking them. I mean, it's when you turn children into your targets, it just seems, it seems unconscionable. Yet somehow that's going to work for them.
Well, guess where the Nazis started?
Did they? They started school boards.
First place they started is in the schools. And guys, let me explain what Bannon's strategy is, because I think I sent this out. Like, the Trump is dumb, right? But the Stephen Miller, Bannon, Roger Stone, and that crew, they've been very strategic and intentional about what they're doing. And if you've studied the rise of fascism, or like how people, I don't think people understand, like the Nazi party was non-existent, had no political power. It tried a violent overthrow that was like a total joke. And then it endeavored, while Hitler was in jail for 5 years, to turn itself into a legitimate political party. And within 10 years, controlled the whole country, right?
Yeah.
How did they do it? They started by going after the schools. Getting a vocal minority to attack the school boards, attack like the curriculum, and then take over the curriculum and turn it into their party propaganda. So, it's not like it's organic. And my point is, it looks organic, but it's like a lot of things on the right. It's part of a strategy to lay the groundwork for bigger things.
And it's also, they used the Vatican, they used the power, the elite of Germany. I mean, they had a lot of support from other places, not just this. It looks like a grassroots movement, but it isn't a grassroots movement, is what I guess I'm trying to say.
Right.
Yeah. So you've got, we know this about Nazi Germany. We know that happened there. Why can't we just stop it from happening here? Why is it so hard for us to stop it?
Well, because of the same reason it was hard to stop there, because by the time the threat becomes obvious to the average person, it's far too far down the road, right?
Right.
So like, what we are trying to do, me, the Never Trump people who are on the pro-democracy bandwagon, some elements of like partisan Democrats who are able to see the forest for the trees, because obviously Democrats have power in Washington right now, and
so
that makes them focus on policy, right? Because you want to use so it's kind of sidetracking from the Democratic crisis, right? And the Never Trumpers don't have anything else to focus on, right? So it's not like they have a purer heart. It's just that's what they're focused on. But so it's about me and others trying to get our half of the electorate to understand we have like a 5-alarm fire. Like a 5-alarm fire. Right now.
6-alarm fire, whatever you have, like 10-alarm fire.
But you don't like go into a 7-Eleven or like Starbucks, because you want someone college educated, so you at least get like a philosophy major, right? And mention to them like that we're on the brink of democratic collapse, which I do every time I interact with regular folks, because like that focus group, regular people all the time, like they don't know that. They're always like, wow, it's that bad. I'm like, oh yeah. No,
why don't they know it? We've all been yelling it for years. I mean, I've been sitting here on this show for years yelling at people. Everyone's been yelling at them for years. Why don't people realize how serious this is?
For some reason, all of a sudden. Okay, there you go.
Oh, can you hear us?
Yeah, it's for some reason your voice has gone full droid.
Oh, has it? Oh, I'm sorry about that. I don't know how to fix that. Am I still sounding full droid?
No, you sound fine.
Okay.
It's still very, very, very. It's like R2 and
R2D2 meets the
had a love
whatever.
child.
Well, I don't know how to fix that.
I think you sound okay on the live stream. It might be on Rachel's end.
Yeah.
But I have a couple things from
Go
the
ahead.
viewers.
I'll try to fix my microphone in the meantime. Go for it.
First of all, Ms. Bidikofer, so great to meet you. It's so exciting to have you on the show. I think there's a few things. One question that viewers have is, how do Democrats take the gloves off there's a sentiment that the GOP's gone full amoral and the Democrats still have empathy and care. So how do they actually take the gloves off and fight this war is one of the questions.
Yeah, I would encourage anybody watching this, if they haven't seen our collection of videos, like the YouTube page doesn't include like all the people who've seen it, right? Because it's had pretty good play. But like I would highly recommend you watch our launch video, which is called Fuse, and it shows how like to make the case about democracy being on the ballot. Like the 22, like the reason the midterms are everyone's so like pessimistic about it as a political scientist is I can promise you like the midterm fundamental is really rough, right? But what makes it rough is that like we, especially on this side, never like shape our own media narratives. We don't manipulate media coverage the way that the right does. I mean, they've built their own machine to do it now, but even within that, they still manipulate the media narrative. We don't do that. So when we think about like, how do you get around a midterm effect? You have to be pounding the other side because they're going to pound you. And that's really the GOP's playbook, right? They never run on policy. They run against us, right? So like they basically win elections by disqualifying us. So we really want to like, so when you ask me like specifically, how do you take the gloves off? I'm here to tell you, it's not some like hypothesis, right? I can show you how to do this. Go to the YouTube page and see like how you weaponize this branding, framing, attack shit that they pull out on us that's like hyperbolic. The nice thing is we don't have to make shit up. They're so nuts, right? Like, so it's all truthful, right? But it's hyperbolic because we got to make ads that talk to people in the gut. People's heads, they don't know shit. You got to talk to them in the gut. So, so I would say like to them, there's a way to do it. And we're showing people how.
One other thing, I unblocked Mitch McConnell for the first time today on Twitter because of the Deripaska thing. Yes, I did.
Yeah,
and to your point,
McConnell tears, right?
To your point, every single tweet of his started Democrats are, like it was some sort of Mad Libs, and they pound that negative messaging, and there's something to learn there. Another question the viewers have is they want to know if this red pushback that we see in the media is actually smaller than it appears. And they also want to know, hopefully Zev will come back. They also want to know if it's organic. I think we've already answered that, or if it's like Koch funded by, dark money, essentially.
So can you remind me the first question that you asked again?
Sure. Yeah, they want to know if what they see in the news is all of this crazy happening at school boards and craziness about homeschooling, and they want to know if the red pushback is smaller than we think. If it's not as great. Yeah. What can you tell them about that and where you think it actually stems from, if it's organic or not organic?
Yeah. So I mean, here's the thing, like usually when you've got like one side's partisans showing up and yelling at public meetings, that's like a sign of enthusiasm, right? And I'm not just saying that these people like these anti-mask aren't enthusiastic. It's just that we also saw like a good turnout at the Women's March, right? We're seeing good early voting in Virginia. We saw good turnout in the California recall, which are good. Like, so these are things we now know, hard data, not polls, that we didn't have before to look back and kind of analytically assess. So, in terms of, how is it a real movement? Yeah, it is. Okay. But it's also a fake movement because I can guarantee you, if let's say Hillary Clinton had been president, or anybody, like any other, and maybe not a Democrat, like Rubio, and this pandemic had come in and he's sane, so he would not have ever turned the pandemic into this weird, crazy partisan issue. The people are crazy about the pandemic because the GOP's media system, its influencer network, and its politicians told them to be, right? So like I know for sure that that is a top-down effect. There's always some vaccine nuts, but what we're seeing in this vaccine rejection, and I started telling people this was coming way before the vaccines were released, when I saw the coverage and Trump's response, that what we're seeing here is basically a weaponization, a symbolization, right, in this thing. So and like a vocal minority can be very distorting. So like when we think about like the NRA, like that, when they're agitated, it can look very distorting. They've been very agitated here in Virginia, since the Democrats actually made some modest common sense gun reform. I mean, nothing crazy, just saying, maybe wife beaters shouldn't have guns. So like when we get the election results in a couple of weeks, we're going to find out, like, did all these rallies and all the shit that they were doing matter? But or not, right? Because
Rachel,
like,
you're losing your top of your head, which is must be because you're so passionate about these things.
There we go.
But it's nice to have you back here.
I'm sorry, just so the viewers know, I recently moved. I have no like furniture set up because I have no husband yet, and you guys just get this.
You have no husband yet. You say you no husband there yet? You mean?
Yeah, no husband yet.
No husband installing furniture.
And I'm good at what I'm good at, but assembly ain't one of them.
Oh, I'm with you. I don't do those things. I tried. I did the mural. I put up the mural. That's the last thing I did, and I stopped there. I learned the hard way not to do these things. Can you go back to this question earlier on about, you said about messaging, and just give us an example? Like, what is when you say like a GOP messaging? Give us an example of what that might look like compared to what the Democrats do now.
Yeah, sure. I was talking to a reporter today, like Financial Times article, and he asked me like, "Oh, what do you mean by like how, like," because I was like, listen, like the Democrats, the reason that the press is able to set this narrative about the dollar figure for the Build Back Better reconciliation bill is because the Democrats don't do a coordinated talking point. Everyone's pounding it like, hey, sniper version of selling the bill, right? The GOP would pick one thing, either to run against or to run for, and they would make that the symbol of the whole legislation. And even if it did a piss poor job of representing the legislation, they would still do it because they understand cerebrally the average voter can't hold on to nuance and complexity. They'll tune it out as soon as it starts coming at them. They need simplicity. And so like you would run on, hey, we're passing the biggest middle class tax cut in decades, and the Republicans are blocking it, right?
Yes.
And then you would just pound that, like, why do Republicans support every tax cut except for the one that goes to you, American middle class, right? And if you just made that stand out in front of all the, like, there's a bunch of great shit. Our impulse is, we got to tell everybody about all the great shit.
Yeah. No one gets excited about broadband. I mean, it's interesting.
No shit. And the reason we want to do that is because we think everyone's like us. And if everyone was like us, yes, they wouldn't need to know about all the good shit, but then we wouldn't need to tell them because they'd already know and they'd already vote. But you know what I mean?
Childcare is a good one. Everyone understands childcare. Much better than broadband.
If this was reversed, right? And like they would just murder us on voting against this thing. Of course. Like it doesn't matter if like the way that the thing came to the middle class was by sacrificial demon sacrifices of infants and a altar, right? They would still eviscerate us for voting against us. So that's all we got to do. Like, we already know exactly what we got to do. We already have a team in place, myself included on this team, that can articulate this shit into like executable product. And we just got to get it into field,
Right. So there's potentially childcare and they're fascists. So not only do they want to take away your child, there's a lot there to run on.
That's right. That's right. Well, I mean, there's a way to sell fascism, like the fear of it, right? Like when you got to make people feel it in their bones, right? Like what will fascism mean to this like white suburban middle class mom, right? And like how will it affect them economically? What's going to happen when it's their door that gets knocked? Or
so
just the naivety of it. I mean, I grew up in South Africa, so I have a good idea of what it's like to grow up in a fascist country, and it's it's awful in every regard. I mean, you have no sense of, you can't speak out. You don't trust your friends. You don't trust your neighbors. You don't know who's going to call the cops on you. You don't know who's going to, is someone going to tell someone at the school that your kid has been misbehaving? And
you bring that shit to
Yeah.
life in a
Yeah.
30-second ad,
Yeah.
right? With like some good Hollywood production budget behind it, because we that's our asset. They've got a propaganda network, and it's firing full tilt, and it goes now through local TV news, local newspapers. They bought it all up, right?
Yeah.
We got Hollywood, dude.
We've got Hollywood. Also, we've got real fear. I mean, that's something to be really scared of. It's really scary to think of.
I will make you an ad. I will make you ads that will freak people out.
Yeah.
Okay?
But we need that. We need that. We're not seeing it. It makes me nervous we're not seeing it, because.
But here's the thing, and like for anybody who's watching this and thinking, well, I don't want to do that to people. The other side is doing that to other people. That's why they're coming for your democracy, because they've been told already you're coming for theirs.
Right. It is all fear. I mean, everything the GOP stands for has been fear, but it's all just been ratcheting up the fear. So. It's kind of sad we're here at this stage. Let's talk a little bit about Bannon's involvement in Jan 6 as this committee gets going here a little bit. The things that he's mostly, we think of Bannon as sort of this kind of not really that involved strategist, but he really is kind of involved. He's more involved than we realize. Certainly the committee's looking at what he did on January the 5th, which is meet with a bunch of congressional leaders to try and convince them to stop the vote when they voted on the vote on the 6th. But he also said, quite tellingly, and everyone's been pointing to this one quote, that there is that there'll be all hell is going to break loose tomorrow. I think he said on the War Room, that's his podcast, which is also, a tool for ratcheting up fear. Just even the name itself, the War Room, indicates that you're sitting there, ratcheting up some sort of conflict, even though there isn't one that's necessarily going on. But it also turns out that he was very involved in actually coming up with a whole strategy for what date to pick, when is the right moment to do this, and he came up with January 6th. And the biggest tell I think that people are missing is, maybe they aren't missing it, but it's worth reinforcing in any event, is that on January, the three main players in January 6th, Michael Flynn, Roger Stone, Stephen Bannon, there's others, of course, but certainly these are your, three key ones. All three of these guys got pardoned by Donald Trump just before January 6th, at various times, but just before January 6th. The thinking seems to be that basically they were pardoned so they can go out and commit another crime in January the 6th. So, to me, that kind of pattern is really interesting, because it does take us back to Donald Trump's involvement in that day. The idea that he might have been the central figure involved in pardoning these three in order to then have them commit another crime actually involves him quite directly in this crime. Many people are telling me that it's going to be Bannon who is scapegoated in this whole event, that it's not going to be anywhere near Donald Trump or get up to that level, but we could see someone like Bannon scapegoated. Do you think that'll be enough if someone like Bannon gets thrown in jail? Would that be enough to satisfy the hunger of Democrats?
I mean, I don't know about that, but I know it's not enough to satisfy the rule of law, right?
Yeah, right.
I mean, here's the thing, right? So, like, I'm not a reporter, like an actual reporter. I don't have to like worry about using the word allegedly or anything or getting out in front of speculation, right?
Right.
And here's what we know. Number one, and this is always important to stress, January 6th is a capstone event in a series of events designed to stage an illegal coup and steal permanent power in the U.S. and democracy, right? So it's, and now, of course, like, we have more detail because the Eastman memo came out. And so, like, we're starting to see more of that. But we already know there was like a attempted coup at the Justice Department to find someone who would invalidate the election results. Bannon, Stone, and the others were all pardoned. Of course, Bannon was pardoned on midnight of January 19th, right before the impeachment. But I think it was to cover him retroactively for all of these conspiratorial plotting, right, to steal power. And they did it all in plain sight. I mean, we saw like we saw what we saw, right?
Mhm.
Like, so we know that like Trump and Bannon and Roger Stone were all in contact. We know Roger Stone was in contact with these Proud Boys. Like we know for sure that Trump was involved with these men in some capacity on the planning and execution of January 6th. This
Yeah.
is much more like complicit and culpable activity from Trump than his words on the stage on that day, in my opinion. Like, oh, go to the Capitol and tell them you're pissed, right? Like
Yeah.
that, you could argue, was inartfully worded, but like he meant go outside and yell at them.
Yeah, there's an
Right?
excuse for that. There's a way to
Yeah.
get off that.
Yeah, that to me is not, is neither here nor there. It's the activities that he did, which included January 6th to seize power, that are much more, I mean, there's just so much that we can see in public view. And Eastman memo was something we didn't even know about
Yeah.
until 2 weeks ago. So like obviously there's a lot there. Now to get all the way up to Trump, I do think it is going to be a hitch that he tended not to put anything in electronics. And for a dumb man, that's pretty smart, and he is dumb, right?
Mhm.
So I mean, I think that is a complicating factor.
I think Bannon put a
you're
lot in
dumb-
electronics. I think we'll see a lot from him.
Yeah.
I'm going to bring in, because it's my fault for waiting too long to bring Andrew, and I got so carried away with our conversation. Hi, Andrew Laufer. How are you?
Hey, Zeph, how you doing?
I'm good. I'm so sorry for keeping you waiting there. I just, got so distracted by Rachel Bitterkoffer, who's our other guest here. You guys have not met, maybe you have. Have you, Andrew Laufer?
No, but nobody puts Andrew in a corner.
Nobody puts Andrew in the corner. That is correct. We love Andrew Laufer. Andrew, make me feel good about today's events. Is this the right strategy, what they're doing? Are they doing the right thing by going the route that they are?
I mean, my personal opinion is that I think they really should have gone inherent contempt. Congress exercised those powers. Granted, there's not a heck of a lot of use of it in recent history.
What is inherent? Can I just admit that I'm completely stupid about this and I don't know what it is?
It's logistically it would be difficult for them to do it, and generally, the standard fare is them, making criminal contempt referrals to DOJ and having DOJ prosecute. The issue with that is, this is a special power that Congress has that they can utilize. By placing the ball in DOJ's court, they have prosecutorial, discretion. Essentially, they don't have to necessarily prosecute. They can wait on prosecuting. It's not like it's going to happen tomorrow. I believe Eric Prince was referred to DOJ back in January, but that still might have been when Barr was running the show. I think it was right before Biden was sworn in. And that means that Bannon. That means that Barr could have, declined to prosecute right there and then. We won't know that. Basically what'll happen is they'll send Prince a letter or his counsel a letter and say, we are declining to, move forward with charges against you.
So do you think it's going to take longer to go through the DOJ? That would have been shorter if they just used inherent contempt.
Right. And it's not like inherent contempt is putting someone in prison for years. It's basically akin to what happens during a grand jury. If there is a witness that's been subpoenaed and they're not being cooperative, they don't want to testify. They don't, like Chelsea Manning during Julian Assange's grand jury, she was put in jail during the pendency of the grand jury until she agreed to testify, and she didn't. As soon as the grand jury disbanded, she was released. And I think this happened a couple of times with her. So it would be a similar outcome with any of these transgressors of congressional subpoenas. The irony is they'll serve more time, under those circumstances than they would for a criminal conviction or plea, for criminal contempt.
Right.
I don't know if Bannon's got any priors. If he doesn't,
he was pardoned, so he probably gets off some of those, doesn't he?
I mean, it's not removing. It's not removing the stain of the conviction per se.
Right.
It is removing the punishment, though, that's associated with it.
Oh, interesting.
So I don't know how that would play out, but it would definitely be interesting.
But with inherent contempt, there'd be no opportunity for the DOJ to decline to prosecute. They would immediately just put them in jail. Is that correct, or how does it work?
Right. I mean, they would be theoretically,
Mhm.
they would be taken into custody by the sergeant at arms, so to speak, of the house,
And the little jail they have down at the bottom in the basement.
Yeah, they'd be held in a little jail, and he'd get his TV dinners and phone calls and whatever the heck else he wanted. And I'm sure there would be a habeas petition filed by.
He'll do the War Room live from down there if he had his chance.
Maybe
behind bars.
He's a prisoner. He's a prisoner of unconscious. Of unconscious.
So why are they doing it this way? Why are they going to the DOJ then?
I think a number of reasons why they don't want to make it look partisan. That they're throwing him in jail. They don't want to make him a quote unquote martyr for his deranged followers. There's those aspects to it. But at the same time, I mean, there's never going to be a perfect situation. It's always going to be a balancing act.
The idea of Stephen Bannon being a martyr for anyone and people like following that, it just seems so anti-character for him.
I think he would be a martyr for Scotch, because Scotch would be very upset for whiskey if he's suddenly detained.
That's true. He would be very upset about it. Rachel, do you have any questions for Andrew about what he thoughts about the process from a legal perspective that you want to ask Andrew?
No, I mean, I agree with him. I think so. Here's the thing. It's like this idea that if we go through DOJ, then they won't tell us it's a partisan witch hunt.
Right. Right. It's true.
Here's the thing. There's nothing you can do. There's no amount on reconciliation you can spend less that they're going to not call you a socialist. So in this regard, AOC is right. I mean, I'm not saying I agree with AOC on a lot of things, but I'm telling you, she's right on this. You cannot run away from these labels. You have to run into them. And so, you file inherent contempt and you throw his ass in jail in the worst conditions you can possibly articulate for a guy who is telling people he wants to go to jail. Fine, give him the DC experience, dude. Let's see how much he likes jail in DC. I bet he'll be popular there.
Yeah, he probably would be. Who knows? Lots of shirts to give away in any event. He wears lots of them.
Yeah, he'll be real popular.
Heidi, we'll get to this question. Is there any questions you want to throw in now? But I do want to go through some of the other spy stuff. But in the meantime, is there anything you want to throw in?
I mean, there's multiple concerns from our viewers. One is that they believe that propagandists like him are actually domestic terrorists, and that they feel like there's been a pussyfooting around this. The other concern
they're not even domestic terrorists; they're foreign state terrorists. But that's another. A lot of them
are.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly. And the other question I think there's a big concern about is this idea of executive privilege. If there's just a way that people can get more clarity on that.
That's interesting. Tell us about executive privilege, Andrew. Do they have any claim in court yet? Do they have any defense around that at all?
Zero at this juncture. Trump is no longer president. He doesn't have the right to assert executive privilege. Executive privilege tells you who has the right, whoever the executive is. It's not Trump privilege. It's not Clinton privilege or Obama privilege. It's the executive branch. It's the executive branch.
It's the office, really. It's not even a person.
Right. Exactly.
Right.
And Biden has already waived any kind of executive privilege there, and there's nothing Trump's going to do. He's going to lose. This is just going to be thrown in the pile of the thousands of other lawsuits he's gotten destroyed on.
So this is going to be a time play. They're basically going to waste some time here while they hope they win the next election. They can kill the whole commission.
I don't know if that's the case. I don't know if upon filing this lawsuit they requested in order to show cause, like a stay to prevent the Jan 6th, to prevent these records from being released. I don't know if they did that. If they didn't do that, there's no stay. They can, the executive branch can do whatever they want. They could just be like, okay, that's nice, you filed a lawsuit.
I mean, in terms of Bannon handing over his stuff and participating, they're playing for time, probably.
Yeah, I mean, they're playing. I don't even know what they're playing for. They think they're playing for time, but it's really a foolish endeavor. The attorneys are going to get potentially sanctioned, not as bad as the Kraken. I mean, Kraken nonsense, but it really depends on the representations made. From what limited aspects I garnered from the complaint. It's nonsense. There's just no merit. It's meritless.
But you've got a conspiracy here, possibly, potentially this is a conspiracy, right? There's all these players, maybe Trump's in the middle, maybe he's not, but you got, Flynn, Stone, Bannon, all involved in conspiracy. Presumably, if that's the finding of the commission, those are grounds to then file criminal charges against these people, or are they completely separate investigations?
Completely separate.
So there'll be no bearing on.
No. DOJ is not going to allow Congress to do their discovery for.
But if what Stephen Bannon says in front of Congress, can that be held against him in a criminal investigation?
Absolutely. Right. Any public statement.
So he'll plead the fifth if he doesn't. If he probably.
He's already done some really dumb things. But that's not really a shocker.
Yeah.
With his crew, they just, it's just all about gaslighting and bravado. If they were, the buck's going to stop at some point. And when that occurs, they're going to be in a lot of trouble. And all these crazy, stupid statements they've made are going to come back to
every episode of the War Room ever.
It all lays the groundwork for intent to foment an insurrection. Conspiracy, sedition, crimes against the United States, you name it. I mean, there's every sort of possible crime that these bumbling fools have committed. And, part of what makes us feel powerless is because of the microphones they have right now, the megaphones, that they're out there, they're spewing nonsense, and no one's really stopping them but things are moving forward. Oleg Deripaska's house was raided in DC and New York, which makes me very happy. It really brings some sunshine into my life when I see these murderous Russian oligarchs being held to task by our law enforcement, and they should be held to task. They should be red noticed, all of them, and they should all have a lot of problems from here on in, because they were the engine, that Putin weaponized to attack, the West.
Certainly Deripaska was the central figure for me in the crime that was Trump Russia. I mean, more than anybody else, he's the one person you can connect to all the different disparate elements of Trump Russia, whether it's Assange or whether it's Manafort or Kilimnik, all of that. He connects directly to all of those. And it would be nice for him to see him, at least pay the price. Certainly, because he's never been sanctioned. He got those sanctions lifted against him quickly, so he never even got a chance to get sanctioned.
It was a political move, right? Zev, it was political by the Trump administration to lift sanctions against Deripaska.
Something about Kentucky aluminum or something like that.
Complete nonsense.
Ask Mitch.
It's criminal. It's one huge criminal conspiracy with a lot of little branches going in 30,000 different directions.
Let me ask you before I let anyone else jump in here, because I'm curious about this one question. These three gentlemen all have ties to different intelligence agencies around the world. Michael Flynn, as we know, is connected to Russia. Roger Stone, also reputedly, close to Russia. Stephen Bannon is a little different. Stephen Bannon is connected to Russia, but he's also, one of the many connections that Donald Trump had to China, because he's worked extensively for China all the way back to as early as 2005, when he first had the internet gaming entertainment company in Hong Kong, which is reputedly part of the intelligence operations of Russia. But even after that, of China, but in 2014, he was also close to Russia when Mercer, who's Robert and Rebecca Mercer, also very connected to Russia, joined with him to buy Breitbart and also Cambridge Analytica. And that goes on in 2016 when Rebecca Mercer forces Donald Trump, we don't know if she forced him, but she told him to, hire Bannon and Conway as the leaders of the Trump campaign, and that's how they got elected. So you got a little bit of China, a little bit of Russia, and this goes on into 2016 when Bannon got a lot of money to produce a documentary from the Chinese sister network, I guess, to the Epoch Times, NTDT. He got substantially awarded a budget to, what does he say here? They can't read it, so small, I can't read this, but it says, I'd give them a number and on a project budget, and they'd come back and say, we're good with that number. That never happens in television production or any production.
Right.
But in this case, they gave him tons of money. At the same time, as Robert and Rebecca Mercer gave the same company $900,000 through a Renaissance technology employee. And that takes you all the way to 2021, when Bannon has been, cavorting. Maybe cavorting is not the right word, with Mr. Guo over here, supposedly a Chinese dissident, but really a agent for the Ministry of Safety and Security, the spy agency of China, pretending to be a Russian dissident. We know that because of the amount of times he's pleaded the fifth in court. These are all, so for all intents and purposes, you've got a bunch of spies doing a lot of things in America. Can we really go after them in court?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
We have obviously jurisdiction over anyone in American territory,
Mm-hmm.
and we can also seek to extradite them here, like we're doing with Assange. And so, yeah, I mean, you've got hundreds of millions of dollars of influence operations going on between Russia and China, all geared towards undermining faith in the West's and specifically United States democratic institutions.
Mm-hmm.
We all know Russia and China are bad. The Uyghurs and all the dissidents that there's no freedom there. But their goal is basically to just say, well, America is just as bad as we are, and at least we're honest about it.
Mm-hmm.
That's their play.
Right.
They know they can't clean their act.
They're honest fascists.
Yeah, exactly. Look, you know what you're getting here. If you don't do what we say, you get a bolt in the head. But at least we're telling you that. you're gonna get beaten, to death, like Sergei Magnitsky, in a Russian jail. So I mean, that's really their play, and the way you push back against that is just to just show that their representatives, whatever nonsense they're spewing, is just what it is nonsense, and discredit them.
You got all the attention taken away from you, Andrew, because look at that cute little puppy.
We have a new guest.
There we go. No, it's more important.
They appear on camera with dogs. They're too cute.
I do have a viewer question that relates to what Andrew was just talking about. The viewers are trying to get some clarity. I know, it's just so great.
Rachel, what's the dog's name? Just so we know.
His name is Hamilton. My followers know him well because
hi, Hamilton.
And he's a kind of a Twitter star.
Oh, is he? Does he have his own Twitter account?
Good. No, right now he piggybacks off mine.
Oh, but look at him! Look at that face! Oh, look at that little guy.
It's 5 o'clock. It's Hammy cuddle time.
You can cuddle. Go ahead. We'll just watch. It looks like fun.
Hamilton is a ham.
He is.
So there's just, the viewers would really appreciate clarity on if someone like Bannon gets a pardon for one crime, is he allowed to then plead the fifth on something else? How does that actually work? Because great, let's hear it.
Well, it depends. If he got a pardon, he's not allowed to plead the fifth regarding the crimes that were pardoned.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and he could also, but if he's facing potential criminal liability for other crimes, even ones that might relate to that previous crime, he does have a Fifth Amendment right. I've dealt with those types of issues before in other matters in court and stuff like that. So I mean, and that's good. We want to burn these guys so bad. We want to set them on fire and laugh while they're screaming for their whatever. But you got to understand that the way we defeat these people is to show the world that the rule of law works. It's not perfect. It can be messy. It can be gross, and we definitely have our issues, and we could always improve upon it, but it works, and it's much better than the totalitarian, authoritarian nonsense of Xi and Putin and any other would be authoritarians out there. So
I think it's important. I'm sure you read the Build the Wall indictment, and it showed that Stephen Bannon wasn't particularly great at criming. I mean, there was so much evidence, according to the indictment, of the money that was, grifted from the base toward the pockets of those on the indictment. So I don't know, is there anything that we can say to tell people? I think there's this fear and terror that is stirred up about potential violence, but maybe these propagandists aren't necessarily that bright at all things.
They're dumb. They're not smart. I mean, they have certain They may have certain insight into certain things. They're smart enough to be a pain in the neck. Let me put it to you that way. They can gum up the works, and that's all they need to do. They need to just be smart enough to do that. But I mean, we've got a very good, and I'm a civil rights attorney. This is me, and you see me sticking it for DOJ all the time, even though they're an adversary of mine in cases. We've got a very good criminal justice system. There's a number of things that need to be improved. MCC, for example, in downtown Manhattan, where Jeffrey Epstein committed suicide, and where I've had a client was murdered, is like a Holiday Inn Express compared to the prisons that you see in China and Russia and Saudi Arabia. I mean, it's just these people just get to bathe, they get to eat, and they're treated with a modicum of humanity, a modicum, but that's a modicum more than any of these other countries.
Yeah, I mean that particular prison is terrible.
Right. So these things take time. I don't know what people are getting charged with. I don't know what indictments are sealed potentially out there. I don't know, and I shouldn't know, and no one should know. But my feeling is that things are moving forward. I liked, and we see that in the newspaper. We should keep putting public pressure on our leaders to investigate these things and prosecute these people where we know, as a matter of law, crimes were committed in real time on TV, on the internet that we've watched. So those are good things. Not just trust with what they're doing. Constantly ask questions. Constantly go at them. And if you don't feel like they're performing the way we should, you can even be critical. Not to the point where you don't believe in the system anymore, but just this is what why isn't this happening? Why is why is it taking so long? So
we should tell everyone that the vote has now been passed, right? So they've now voted to refer Steve Bannon to
Merrick Garland,
to the full House first, and then they'll vote, and then to Merrick Garland. So that'll be the first time we've seen a subpoena enforced by a committee, isn't that right? I think basically in the last few years.
One thing I also want to remind everyone is that this is another reason why I wanted Congress to kind of move forward with holding Bannon in contempt and anyone else in contempt, regarding this incredible assault on our democratic institutions from January 6th, is because basically we're showing that our system works, that we're going to use all tools necessary in order to bring about justice, in order to bring about disclosure of the truth about what we're dealing with here. I mean, this was a horrific event in American history that will echo, even though they're all a bunch of bumbling idiots. And
then we have a legislative branch, which is nice that the legislative branch is actually operating as a legislative branch and can do oversight and that kind of stuff, and not just be castrated or whatever it was in the past. Rachel, I want to get you in here. What are your thoughts? So this has now happened. How is America going to receive it, and how should people be messaging it?
Yeah, I mean, I'm sorry. I'm just going to take a point of privilege and move back a little bit.
Okay, go do whatever you want.
Been itching here, like at the bit.
I know. I'm sorry. We're talking.
I just want to put this on Andrew's radar. So, here's the thing. Yeah, they're not good criminals, right? Mm-hmm. But they're not stupid people either. I mean, Breitbart was not a stupid endeavor. It's an evil endeavor. Mm-hmm. It's a horrible, toxic endeavor, but it wasn't dumb. So they're not dumb. So you have to think, why would these not dumb? I mean, Trump's dumb, but the others, right? Mm-hmm. Why would these not dumb people commit flagrant crimes and leave flagrant evidence trails? To me, it's because they assume that they can seize power. And I mean, the rule of law is going to catch up with them, but not if they control things, right? So to me, when I hear the confidence in the system, and I am a huge system person, I'm a big believer in the rule of law in the system. I worry that they're not using the elements of the system in their own strategy. Okay, if we can just spin this out long enough, even if we get convicted, we can take power again in 22, 24, maybe illegally, but whichever way, they can use the pardon system to get the state legislatures are now overturning passing laws to overturn elections. They're passing constitutionally invalid abortion legislation. So I just don't think we should ever look at Bannon, Miller, Trump, the MAGA GOP, and not assume that they know what they're doing, right? And if they're flagrantly doing crimes, it's probably because they expect to work us in terms of enforcement.
Yeah, they can probably get away with
it. And
it.
if they win, and if they seize power, you're 100% right.
Right. Right.
They'll get away with it.
So we must make the wheels of justice are notoriously slow. We better be bringing in some grease.
And the reason why I keep bringing up, it's so true.
Well
it's so
done.
true. Well done. The reason why I keep bringing up all these foreign countries that are backing these people is it's not just Bannon, and it's not just Roger Stone and Flynn. They've got huge countries' intelligence services helping them out. They've got lots of brains out there with lots of money, lots of military know-how that are helping them out. And that's why it's so hard to break through from a messaging perspective for the Democrats, because they're such a machine.
I would be far less concerned if they were doing discrete crime, right? But like, think about Mitch McConnell's dealings with, I can never say that Russian last name. So the dude
Deripaska?
right? Yeah, I suck at it, right? Suck at English too. As you guys know.
They're hard to get. Once you practice a few times, you'll get it.
But I'd be so much less nervous if they weren't so atrociously flagrant about what they're doing. It's because they are atrociously flagrant that I'm scared shitless, right? So,
well, that's part of their active measure. I mean, that's part of their process. You know, that's part of their mission, to just be grifters and greedy and be open and obvious about it, because they want to show or demonstrate that the system is not fair, that if you have power, if you're in the right position, you can get away with things. And you know, like at least in Russia and China, they're honest about it.
But I think this is more than just grifting. To help Rachel out a little bit here, that maybe they were actually quite serious about turning America into a fascist country. They're actually quite serious about the white nationalism. They're not. They will do this. This is just we're on the journey to there, and I think people are discounting that. People assume that American rule of law will somehow overcome this just because it's American rule of law. But we are in a epic, battle of the ages between autocracy and democracy, and one of those is going to win. But we don't know yet which one's going to win, and we can't assume that it's going to be the Democratic side or the democracy.
There's nothing inevitable about our survival right now.
Yeah, I agree with that. But I am an eternal optimist. And I'm fighting. I'm fighting hard as I can as an attorney, as an officer of the court, being involved in Twitter. I don't make any money off Twitter, me
either.
Just to be there, just to be a voice of reason, to be a voice for the republic, and so we can rally around each other and survive and get through this together. If people like us don't stand up, then what's the point?
And we just can't. I mean, it's as at the beginning of the show, we talked about like inherent characteristics of people on our side of the spectrum. I'm centrist, right? But I'm still on the center and center left side of the spectrum. We can't afford to believe in the best in people when the other side is being not their best people. Right?
The GOP is. Oh, I'm sorry. You want to?
I was just going to say, to everything you guys are saying, there's been a line that's haunted me from Ann Nelson, who wrote Shadow Network. She told me in an interview there was never a day when the majority of Germans woke up and voted for Hitler. It just didn't happen. So that's always haunted me, because sometimes it doesn't take, quite often we're seeing it doesn't take a majority to game things, to create the voter suppression. But we do know when the Democrats do activate their base, they generally win. So that is a hopeful note.
It's up to us. I mean, I don't think we would go down the Nazi Germany path. There's a lot of differences between America and 1930s and 20s Germany. The humiliation of World War I, and they basically didn't have a very long history of democratic institutions. We've always improved. We started out at X, and we're way further away from that. But like we're all, I think we're all kind of echoing, is that we can't rest on our laurels. Our rights are not self-activating. We need to exercise them, and we need to fight for our republic, whether it's just with the word or the pen or God forbid it ever comes to the sword, so to speak.
Right.
We need to fight for it, otherwise we'll lose it.
But we also need to learn how to
Yeah.
fight. And I think that's what Rachel was talking about at the start of the show, about the messaging,
Yes.
the type of messaging.
Right.
Can you give us another couple of examples? I found it very effective when you gave us that one example earlier on. Like, what are the, we're all nice people, so we treat people nicely and we cooperate and we don't confront, and on Twitter we support each other and it's lovely, but it's not doing anything. It's not going at the other side. It's not destroying the other side. It's just sort of, they're laughing at us and calling us whatever names they have. Like, what's the approach that's going to be different for us on Twitter and elsewhere that's going to actually make change?
Well, I mean, you don't have to totally move away from like the things that are natural for us either. Like, you can still talk about policy, but think about how like the Republican Party, when it does talk about policy, somebody called me and I had
No, don't worry. Hi.
This has just been a survival interview, the dog, the kids, Anyway, like when the Republican Party talks about policy, as I was saying earlier, it's always sniper, never shotgun, right?
Mhm.
And they bring it to life. They make it personal. It's always about me, not we. Okay. All of our stuff, we care about the collective, so we frame things in a collective frame. Vote. They're going to steal these people's voting rights. They're going to take abortion and hurt these women, or whatever, right? The GOP talks about things emotively and in a me frame. They're going to take all of your guns, It's not, the policy is a red flag law, which, makes it so a wife beater can't, have a gun for 90 days, right? But the rhetoric is very over the top and heated and emotive and direct to the person, right? So like when I talk about policy, like this abortion ad that I have in the works, like there's lots of things wrong with the Texas abortion law, but the whole ad is focused on one element, bringing to life the vision of being forced to bear a rapist baby, being forced by the state to carry a baby to term, and then potentially having to raise it with co-parent with your rapist.
It's a rape law. It really is.
That's bring policy to life, guys.
Yeah, that works.
And it's all like shit that the GOP does, and like the way I teach it, because I've studied this stuff anthropologically before I endeavor to try to save democracy with it, is it's about bringing this emotive stakes. It's a stakes, right? Okay, now I've got to vote because it's about me, or my daughter, right? Is gonna be hurt if I am not participating. And right now we don't really talk to anybody in like in a messaging way about why voting for Democrats is important, right? Like, so it's if you're going to talk about credit claiming, for example, so it's not enough to say, hey, I gave you a $250 child tax credit. You have to say, Democrats gave you this thing that is doing this thing for you, and they're coming to take it. Right.
So it's not.
There's definitely messaging issues.
Yes.
It's not about talking about autocracy either. It's about talking about your freedoms are going to be taken away. Your right to speak is going to be taken away. Your right of association is going to. You got to talk about those specific things, not about that autocracy thing over there, because that's really hard for people to understand.
Like, I mean, you can do a whole series on ads about fascism that they're not focused on like these broad theme concepts. Though I have people tell me, well, people don't even know what authoritarian or fascism is, and I'm like, yeah, well, 5 years ago they didn't know what socialism is either. But it seems to be working pretty damn good for the other side, doesn't it?
Right.
Wait until you're the pariah of the world, and no country will accept you there. No
problem in the U.S., right? It's a completely made up phenomenon. CRT, completely made up phenomenon.
Right.
Police,
we just kept we just kept our governor in California because we did stop the Republican recall. It was that simple. There was nothing else. Was that you?
It came from you?
Oh, hey!
Well done, Rachel. Gavin Newsom says because of you.
That's awesome.
The Newsom campaign, I did not coordinate with the Newsom campaign, but I pushed really hard, really early, and told them, look, the only data point that matters in any of the polling you're doing is how enthusiastic are Democrats to vote. You have a 20-point registration advantage. Get those people to vote, dude.
Yeah.
And the way
that's
you
what
do
happens.
that is you make So like the ad I cut for the California recall, which you can also see on that YouTube page, is about teaching the other campaign professionals. You tell the California voter it's not about Newsom. It has nothing to fucking do with him. It's about you. It's a recall on you. They're coming for you, California.
Well,
that's
it
how you get
worked, and I
shit
thank
done,
you.
dude.
Thank you.
No, that's awesome. That's playing on what you had said earlier, making it personal.
Yeah.
And, I
So
think that's the
like
way
if
to go.
you're if you're listening to this show, if you think this makes sense, if you want to see it in action, go to that
What's what?
YouTube page. It's on Twitter too, and you can see so these videos resonate. Like when you compare how they're performing against like the official campaign stuff. I mean, they're getting big views because they resonate. People recognize it right away for what it is. It's effective brand stakes framing nationalized messaging, and the reason they recognize it is because they're like, oh, that's what they do to us, but we're doing it to them this time.
So what's the YouTube page? It's strikepack.com, is that right?
The PAC's name is Strike Pack.
Okay.
And it's all female. It's the only all female super PAC. It's the only one that's ever been made by a reformed academic.
Hamilton's there though. That's not really. He's not
Hamilton's actually going to be our mascot dog. Once we get the merch stuff going, and I'm sure he's going to sell a lot of stuff because he's much better looking than I am.
Well, you're both great, and we're so glad you came on the show to give us all this great insight. And people can follow you at Rachel Bitterkoffer, which is BITECOFER, Rachel Bitterkoffer, I think. And thanks very much for being here tonight. Anything else you want to say? You've mentioned your Strike Pack. That's STRIKE PAC, PAC. Anything else that you want to mention that you can promote, or any other last thoughts from you?
I'll just say 2022, 21 in Virginia. It's democracy versus fascism. Make no mistake about it.
Right. Absolutely.
Thank you for that.
Yeah.
Andrew, any last thoughts from you? I know I came to you a little late, and I apologize for that. So we'll have to have you back on soon. But give us a last thought about what you think is happening tonight with Bannon, and anything else you want to talk about.
I think we have no choice. I think DOJ knows what's at stake here. I think our leadership knows what's at stake here, and I think they need to do what they need to do within the boundaries of the law to get these, the proper people prosecuted. We've gotten hundreds. They've done great getting the cannon fodder prosecuted, but we need the leadership prosecuted.
Yeah,
we need Flynn. We need Stone. We need all the people that were Trump and members of Congress that were giving tours to some of these putative January 6th insurrectionists. So we really need to go after the leadership. And I really felt all warm inside seeing Deripaska getting ready today.
It really was a good feeling, because I thought they'd ever forgotten about that. And seeing Steele yesterday on TV, I was like, it's an interesting 1-2 punch. You got Michael Steele saying, "This is Michael Steele, right? Yeah."
Christopher
Steele, thank you. Michael Steele for our GOP. Michael Steele is something. Yeah. But you got him out there saying this Steele, the dossier was legit. He doesn't feel like it's ever been disputed, and he thinks the Mueller report was accurate, or backed it up at least. And then the next day you get Deripaska searched. That's an interesting combination of events to happening in over 2 days. I'm not saying it's coordinated. Who knows if it is? It might be, but it certainly made me feel good for all the hard work we all did those many years. Andrew Laufer, thank you very much for joining us. You're at Laufer Law, LAUFER Law on Twitter. One of the best Twitter accounts out there. Everyone should follow Andrew. Thank you for being here tonight. And thank you, Rachel Bitterkoffer, for being here tonight. Heidi and I are going to stick around for a few minutes, but thank you very much for being here. We appreciate it.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks for having us.
Thank
nice to meet
you.
Bye. And bye, Hamilton. We miss you already. So cute, Hamilton. I want a dog like Hamilton. How do I get a dog like Hamilton? I forgot to ask what kind of dog it is.
It has to be from a rescue.
Oh, it has to be. I miss my dog so much. So I wouldn't mean. I should get another one. So last thoughts, Heidi. That was really fascinating. A really interesting combination of thoughts around Bannon, because we it was interesting to get the messaging piece of it, the election piece of it, understanding what his strategy is, but also understanding the criminal aspects that are going on right now and what's happening in Congress. These are two things that are converging all at once, and they'll all converge in an election next year. I mean,
Yes.
these are all, they don't operate in isolation. We're all seeing these different streams developing, but they will all ultimately arrive at an election next year, which, even though Rachel says the Democrats have very little chance of winning, I think there's still a long way to go. And maybe by a year from now, the messaging can change. And a lot can change if we fight hard,
That's right. I think this conversation was incredibly productive. I do think there is a deadline for democracy that we have to pay attention to. Conversations like this take the wind out of these propagandists, which is very important. But as our viewers noted, you've got one side messaging, build a wall, lock her up, and you have Democrats saying, let's make sure the rule of law works. And there's a lot of space between those two.
Yeah.
And so
making it personal,
and
making the stakes personal for everyone was really something I'm taking home tonight. And
Me
everyone
too.
can do that on their Twitter accounts. Think about the messaging, think about the way you're don't talk about the policy, talk about the impact it's going to have on people. I think there's so many ways we can learn from people like Rachel, who's brilliantly smart, obviously, and who knows her way around these things. And rather than letting the just the GOP to sort of rampage all over us, let's take the fight to them using some of their own stylistic tools, if you will. And I think we can learn a lot from that.
We have to roll around a little bit in the gutter. It may be inelegant, but our democracy is at stake.
Our lives are at stake. Our lifestyles are at stake. Your lives are at stake, and your lifestyles are at stake. It's not about voting. Fascism is not about voting. Fascism is about not having any freedom. It's about not being able to determine who you can associate with, about where you can work, about who you can live next to, about what you can say in public. It's about feeling secure and safe in your homes. Once fascism arrives, there is no rule of law, so anything can happen at any time based on the whim of one person. And that's the kind of the trade-in that we're going to be facing in just a couple of years from now when the next presidential election comes around. And that's the show for tonight. Thanks very much for being here on Narativ. We are back tomorrow night with a show that is completely unknown. We have no idea what's on tomorrow.
Hopefully it'll include a little bit of chatter about oligarchs.
Yeah. So if you guys have any ideas or questions or anything you want to throw in there for tomorrow, just email, DM us, or either at the bottom of this feed right here. Write us your questions that you want us to answer tomorrow, and we'll answer those questions. Thank you very much for being here on Narativ tonight. It's a big night. Bannon on his way to being found in contempt of Congress. Thank you for being here.
9-0.
Good night, everybody. Narativ is made possible by viewers like you. Join today and support truly independent journalism at patreon.com/narrative. That's patreon.com/narrative.